thank you for holding this important hearing today, and I welcome both Governor Napolitano and Governor Spitzer. One of the purposes of this select committee, which does not have legislative jurisdiction, is to help provide Congress with additional guidance on how to address the sometimes related issues of energy independence and global warming. Therefore, I am very interested in what both the states and what local governments are doing to address climate change. So far, the committee has twice heard from mayors of cities big and small, most recently when the committee held a field hearing in Seattle to accompany a U.S. Conference of Mayors meeting on global warming, where New York City Mayor Bloomberg called for carbon tax. By watching and seeing what the states and localities do to address this issue, members of Congress can get a sense of what works and what doesn't. To me, policies that help promote competition and technological change without driving up the cost of energies are policies that will work and will be supported by the American people. After all, what voter wants to see their energy bill rise? And as members of this panel and our witnesses must surely know, being on the opposite side of the voter definitely doesn't work. As I have said many times before, any global warming policy that costs jobs or hurts the economy doesn't work for me or for my Republican colleagues. Unfortunately, I believe that some of what I learned from the cities and the states will be what not to do, especially when it comes to using regulations to address this issue. These regulations may work if everybody all over the world agreed to them and then actually complied with them. Internationally, this means that China and India must be part of the program. Otherwise, for all the feel-good back-patting that greenhouse gas regulations might create here, it's unlikely that it would actually lead to a worldwide reversal of growth in greenhouse gas emissions. Sure, these regulations will lead to some drop-off of emissions here in the United States, but just look to China and India and increases will be found probably from a manufacturer who decided against making a big investment in the U.S. in favor of a smaller price tag in Asia. Additionally, without the transformational energy technologies that will allow for energy production without creating CO2 emissions, I seriously question whether the voters of our states will show the patience or have the resources needed for these regulations to work. So with that in mind, I watch with great interest the states' efforts to regulate CO2. In the end, the question for our committee will be not whether New York or Arizona lowered their emissions, but whether they also lowered their standards of living in an effort to do so. Obviously, the governors will do their best not to let this happen. It is my hope that the states can be a laboratory of government policy and help Congress learn what it will take to lower greenhouse gas emissions while raising everybody's standard of living. I thank the Chair and yield back to balance my time.
Great.
President Clinton signed the Kyoto Protocol in 1998, but did not submit it to the Senate for ratification. Did he make a mistake in failing to submit the treaty to the Senate for ratification?
I will rarely say this. I think that's a question beyond the kin of my jurisdiction that really relates more to a political judgment that was made back then. I will say this. I wish we had an international accord with respect to the issue of greenhouse gas emissions, one that had as its membership and constituent members those very nations that I know you will focus on by virtue of their size, their hesitancy to participate right now. And I agree with your opening statement that we will do well to persuade them to participate as we go forward.
Okay.
And we need that.
Okay. 2 years before Kyoto, the United States Senate unanimously approved a resolution sponsored by Senators Byrd and Hagel stating that they would not ratify a treaty that was not worldwide in application and which hurt the United States economy. Do you think the Senate made a mistake in unanimously voting for that resolution?
Well, again, I will answer it in a slightly different way. I'm not going to agree or disagree with the precise resolution whose terms I haven't read and passed in a context that maybe is different than that we face today. But I would challenge the premise that resolutions of that sort or behavior of that sort is harmful to our economy. I think just the opposite. I think the experience that we have seen is that energy innovation, moving towards greater efficiency, moving towards energy sources that do not depend upon greenhouse gas emissions, those types of actions and behaviors stimulate our economic growth, push us into frontiers where we have innovative products that we can export, that we generate the sorts of creativity that drive our economy, and so I think that is where we want to go.
Well, the bottom line in this debate is whether there would be a cap or trade system or whether we would rely on technology and innovation to reduce greenhouse gases without the bureaucracy of cap and trade. Now, as you described, Governor Spitzer, cap and trade will require certain electric utilities in your state to buy these offsets, and thus I would presume fold the cost of the offsets into their pricing mechanism on how much they charge consumers. 9 years ago, Clinton's own appointed Energy Information Agency head testified before the Science Committee that this type of scheme would result in an increase in electric rates from somewhere between 14% to somewhere over 60%. How do we justify this indirect tax, and wouldn't it be better to go along with what Mayor Bloomberg said, if we're doing this, to have a direct carbon tax, because at least then politicians are being honest to say that they're taxing consumers?
Well, let me answer you. You have a couple of statements built in there, of course. First, the percentage increases that you talk about, I think, are simply wrong based upon our calculations. In fact, we think consumers will save money because the efficiency savings that will result from our comprehensive energy approach will mean that there will be less energy consumed, and even if the unit price is stable or increases marginally, the consumption will be lower, and so the total cost will go down. I also think it's important to recognize that what we're talking about here in our cap-and-trade system and everything I've been talking about, and this goes back to our joint, well, I'm not sure if Janet in Arizona were parties to this litigation when we were both attorneys general, the litigations we brought about the Clean Air Act. This is market economics. This is eliminating an externality, a cost that is being imposed upon us that is measurable, that has enormous impact upon us in terms of health, in terms of quality of life, that is not measured, that should be brought back into the unit cost of production. And any economist who has an understanding of welfare economics would acknowledge that. All we are doing is capturing that cost, bringing it back into the cost of the product so the consumer can actually see the total cost of the product.
I guess I'd spin it a little bit differently, Governor.
Glad you acknowledge yours is a spin and mine is not.
I think what you just described is a politician's dream because it's a tax that no politician has to vote for. That's how you accomplish it. You know, I don't agree with what the mayor of New York told us a couple weeks ago in Seattle, but what I will say is that at least he's honest and direct in stating that there ought to be a tax on it rather than this cap and trade system where the increased cost of doing what you want to do ends up being folded into the cost of the product that politicians can then scream and yell about because utilities in most areas are regulated. My time has expired, and thank you very much.